There's a chair. You can sit right next to HB. I spent all week trying to think, hey, we're 9 days into this new year, and what would be a good thing to start challenging you guys to think about? And I thought about, what is that thing, that thing that I need to talk about? And I thought, well, you know, maybe we're just finishing football season, we're going into the playoffs. Maybe we can talk about football. We can talk about how God relates to football. I don't really care much for football myself. We can talk about the Jets getting in the playoffs. Because some of us like that. We can talk about the start of basketball season. We can talk about Christmas and the things that we learned this year. But it kept going back to this, what would be that one thing that we could talk about? And so it hit me as I was preparing, and I decided I'll talk about that one thing. And so, HB? So I walked in this morning, and somebody said, "You've got a T-shirt on?" I said, "Yeah, because HB did a shirt for me this week." I know. So, we're going to talk about the one thing, right? that is the whole idea of today, is talking about that one thing. Anybody who needs my sunglasses, you're more than welcome to wear that. You know, I went back and I thought, you know, what is that one thing? And I remember back to 1991, there was a movie called City Slickers. I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen it. Some of you guys weren't born in 1991. For others of us, it's like black and white movies back in 1991. But in City Slickers, there was Billy Crystal played this guy who was 38, 39 years old and had hit a midlife crisis. And he and his friends had decided, you know, they were losing jobs. Billy Crystal's wife looks at him and she says, "You're just so unhappy." And his friend came up and he said, "I've got this great trip we can take." And they head out to spend 2 weeks doing a cattle drive out in the Midwest. And there's a scene in there where Billy Crystal is on a horse. He's sitting on a horse next to the ranch boss, whose name was Curly. Now Curly, if you can figure out who Curly was, Curly looked like the Marlboro Man. He was old. He was weathered from being out and doing this his entire life. And they strike up a conversation. Since we don't have video, I want to play you the audio portion of that conversation.
I'm just saying.
How old are you? 38.
39.
Yeah. You all come up here about the same age, same problems. Spend about 50 weeks a year getting knots in your rope, and then you think 2 weeks up here, long time for you. None of you get it. Do you know what the secret of life is?
No, what?
This.
Your finger?
One thing. Just one thing. You stick to that and everything else to...
That's great, but what's the one thing?
That's what you gotta figure out.
And aren't we just like that? I realized when I went back and saw that and looked at that again, that one thing, the secret to life. Spent my entire life looking for that one thing. What would that one thing look like? I went from one thing to another, hoping that it would fill the void in my life, hoping that this will bring me happiness, this will bring me peace. And all throughout my life, it was always going after that next one thing. This will make me happy. And for a time being, it did. And then, like everything else, it got old. And I have to move on and start looking for that next one thing. And I thought, you know, we all know what that one thing is. If we're followers of Jesus Christ, we know that that one thing, that one person that I met 3.5 years ago, who totally revolutionized and changed my life, turned everything upside down, that was him. And yet, since that time, I find myself, I keep going back to just the busyness of life and forgetting that moment and forgetting everything that he did for me. And I think, you know, I'm so much like Mary and Martha. In Luke 10, there's a story that's told about Jesus coming into a town, and Mary and Martha invite Jesus to come to their house. And Martha's in the kitchen, and she's preparing. She's working around trying to get everything ready for Jesus so that he can eat. And she's scurrying around trying to get everything done, and she's looking for her sister Mary, and Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus. And Martha, frustrated, trying to get everything done, comes in and says, Jesus said, my sister Mary needs to help me in the kitchen. And Jesus says this. He said, Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen which is better. And I think, you know, we go through our lives, we spend our entire lives going through whether it's a good thing or whether it's a God thing, what is the better thing? And in that case, I think Mary chose better. And I find that I do the same thing. I choose good things, but they're not always the better thing. And I thought, as we start this new year, what I wanted to do more than anything is I wanted to bring us into not only the new year, but realizing that this is a new decade. Think back to where you were at the beginning of the last decade. 1999, at the end of that, going into Y2K, I just renovated a nightclub. We changed the nightclub name from the Gatsby's to the Millennium. We were ready to go into a whole new area, a whole new life. And yet I find that I spent 10 years ago, my life was so different. And in Isaiah 43, God is speaking to the Israelites, and God is telling them, don't dwell on the past. Put the past behind you. It's time to move forward. Can you not see I am doing a new thing in you? And I think for this new year, that's what God wants to do in us. He wants to do that new thing. He said, all you need to do is be able to recognize it and see it. And I want to help you do that. I want to help us explore that today. So this talk is in two parts. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over the questions. At 9 o'clock, we're going to come back and we're going to put it into action, everything that we've talked about. So, the questions, I want to explain those. Question number 1 that you're going to be talking about at your tables. In your prayer life in this new year, what is the one thing that you desire from God above everything else? If God were to come to you and say, Hank, I will give you one thing, whatever you ask this year, and only one thing, what would your prayer life look like? What would be that one thing that you were praying for? David in Psalms 27:4 said, one thing I ask of the Lord, this is what I seek above all else, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord forever.